we are live. Welcome to my video on the 1971 movie, Sunday Bloody Sunday. I am going to start with a review with 0 spoilers and then a spoiler-filled thoughts section, but I will warn before I get into any spoilers so you can watch, until that point without me spoiling anything about this movie at all. Happy Pride. This is about a bisexual and one straight woman and one gay man in a love triangle. And I think that is about what I'll say for that for now. So, this is written quite well. There is a lot of credibility and psychological depth to the characters and scenarios. Yeah, it's a really compelling exploration of, like, this, 1971, so you had, like, the hippie movement, there were these new ideas about how one could approach life, and I would definitely say that the movie is willing to see both sides of it, and it was, there's a lot of issues that are not both sides, but where one side is, where in reality one side is reasonable and the other side is completely being ridiculous, but we call the ridiculous side conservatives. They choose to be conservative, they choose to be ridiculous in recent decades. But yeah, with the hippie movement, there were genuinely pros and cons. I myself, as you can probably already tell, am very far left, so I agree with a lot of it, but yeah, there were shortcomings, and the movie does a really good job exploring, it is a lot about, like, people talking and just, like, socializing. It's definitely, if you are not used to movies from, that far back, the movie's, what, 53 years old now, it's not necessarily going to be your kind of thing. But yeah, like, through these various scenes, we get some really good exploration of the characters and their relationships. It's very much a character study. I think that does pretty much cover the writing. So, the direction, a lot of this, it is fairly straightforward, but there are these little wonderful flourishes. Very early on, we see a phone call, the first of many in this film. I'm pretty sure there's, like, you could trim this movie down just a little, and it would work as, like, a PSA about, phones, the good and bad of phones. But yeah, you see this phone call, and the camera pans across the machine, and also we get a close-up of, or medium, I suppose, of the guy making the phone call, and then there's this overlay of what is clearly what he's thinking. He's thinking about the person he's calling, and he's, like, imagining, what is he doing right now? Where is he? I remember what his place looks like. These various things, just, it really captures so well, the panning across the actual machine for the phone call. That's, like, this thing of, well, phones are very important in this film, and yeah, it wasn't, like, super new for the 70s, but yeah, phones very much, like, you know, they have a very strong impact on our lives. And as already mentioned, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But yeah, the thing of, you know, the person making a call to someone he cares about, and then thinking about, oh, I wonder, you know, is he doing this? Is he doing this? I hope he picks up soon. And I remember, you know, this fun little thing he has in his home, and these things, like, it really captures so well. And in general, the film captures being in love, you know, really, really effectively. And it's crucial for the film to work, that it does. Yeah, other than that, like, yeah, solid performances. You know, this is also one of those movies where both the technical and actor direction is solid, and the various aspects. Yeah, you know, production design, the yeah. There's so many little touches. You see multiple people's homes, and you get a sense of who they are and how they're living their lives and such. Very, very effectively done. And some of these places we don't get a lot of screen time. We spend very little time there, but they make an impression. Other than that, there's some other great cinematography. The cinematography is never less than really, really good. It's just not always like really, you know. Again, the movie's 53 years old. You know, you can't expect it to be exactly like, yeah. Wait, 54? Whatever, something like that, you know. But yeah, there's some very effective POV shots, and I think that pretty well covers the cinematography. Yeah, there's some great stuff with lighting. There are scenes, you know, yeah, you'll want to make note of, is it bright or is it dark in a scene, as to how, you know, as the mood, you know. And that is something, like, I'm really glad that there are still movies that take advantage of that, you know. There are a number of movies today that don't, and I'm willing to admit, you know, there's a lot I love about the MCU. I'm willing to admit sometimes they really don't take advantage of lighting and color and, you know, things like that. It's, yeah, exciting camera work. Anyway, the editing is also really solid. There is at least one flashback, and the way they handle it is really nicely done. There's an aspect of it that I am not going to give away. I'll discuss it in the spoiler section, but yeah. And yeah, the way that it covers multiple days, and this is one of those, like, sometimes there are movies where it's great if it's set over a very short amount of time. I guess by now it's been like a year, but I did rewatch Buried, you know, Ryan Reynolds movie, and for that one it works incredibly well that it is very immediate, and it's not necessarily taking place over that long of a time, you know, because these movies are not that far apart in, like, overall runtime. But the fact that this is over a number of days, and you see, because the characters grow over time, and some of them don't grow, you know, which creates a very effective contrast. And yeah, it's just very, very nicely done. I think that might cover that aspect. The music can be very, it comes on very strong sometimes, but it works. Yeah, I think that pretty well covers that. So the acting is phenomenal. This is, oh right, I don't know why I keep forgetting. So the movie is, like, rated R. So will this video be, and I absolutely love the movie. Yes, so the acting, everyone is great. I'm not going to talk about absolutely everyone. Honestly, even the kids are pretty good. I think some people would say, well, you know, they're not asked to do that much. At least one of them is asked for pretty broad range, and she delivers fairly well, which was not super common in the 70s. You know, it's like today we're seeing a lot of incredibly talented, not always child actors, but like young actors. But there was a while where Hollywood kind of just had kids, you know, some of the time it was because they were given these ridiculous, unwieldy lines, you know. And that is, I think, also part of it here. I don't think the kids are ever given lines that it's completely unreasonable, that where you're like, no child actor could possibly, you know. Like a couple of years ago, I watched, yeah, so I'm gonna, okay, I'll just very briefly, so this is kind of, I guess this slightly contradicts what I just said, but it also somewhat proves it. You know, in 2016, I want to say it was, Paul W.S. Anderson, who I'm catching up on Outlaw Vern's reviews. I just read his review for the recent one that Paul W.S. Anderson made with Mila Jovovich as usual, which I'm pretty happy about. You know, I haven't watched the movie. I will at some point. But her, and then Drax. I forget his the actor's name. Nope, it's gone. Dave Bautista. Yeah. Really fun review. Anyway, yeah, Paul W.S. Anderson, you know, directed his own daughter in the final chapter, Resident Evil final chapter, and he, for reasons best known to himself, it's between him and whatever deity he prays to. He gave her just these lines that no one at that age would be able to make sound natural, you know. And I get it. It's this thing of like, well, you know, because it's not, you know, she's not playing a human, she's playing an AI. But he did a much better job with that same thing in the very first movie. You know, there's also, like, there's word choices that a child of that age wouldn't make, but it's not unwieldy, you know. So I don't, and it's, I'm glad that she got more opportunities to act, including in stuff that he didn't direct. That might also help. He's not the world's best actor's director. But, you know, she has since proven, yeah, she's good. You just got to give her material that she can work with. Anyway, yes. So, okay, at this point I might as well. So briefly, you know, the Black Widow, she plays the child version of the Scarlett Johansson character there, the solo movie Black Widow, and she plays Wendy in Peter Pan and Wendy. I think that's what it's called, or plus Wendy, something like that. You know, yeah. I've been catching up on live-action remakes of animated Disney classics. Anyway, she does a really great job in both of those. And those are not easy roles, so just to be clear. Anyway, yeah. But the main ones I'm going to talk about here are the three members of the love triangle. So we have Dr. Daniel Hirsch. I don't think I'm going to be saying the names of the actors. My wrists are too bad to look up anything right now. But Dr. Daniel Hirsch is, you know, a middle-aged gay man, and apparently originally that role was cast with a younger actor, and I gotta say, I don't think it would have the same impact. I really feel like it needed him to be middle-aged for this to really hit as hard as it does. But yeah, you know, through him, we see just how tough it can be to be a doctor. If this movie does not get you to empathize with doctors, nothing will. We see him deal with a number of patients, and several of them, like, the way they talk to him, the things they ask of him, is just so, you know, and this is not criticism of the movie. I'm saying this is a boon, not a bane of the movie. It really shows, like, yeah, you know, I mean, those of you who already know doctors, like, socially, like, outside of their job, this is not news to you, but a lot of us are not, you know. I didn't fully appreciate it until this. I've always tried to be friendly to doctors. You know, they're human beings. You know, they have to deliver a lot of bad news and be very professional in difficult situations. But yeah, there is an optimism to Daniel that's just like seeing this middle-aged man in this relationship that's clearly not 100% fulfilling, and he still manages to find happiness. It's just, yeah, it's very, very heartwarming. And then we have Alex, the straight woman. If I had to guess, I'm thinking she's in her 30s or something. And yeah, I mean, things are not working out quite as she hoped for reasons that I'm not going to get into before the spoiler section. And yeah, we see she's a character that we definitely see like really consider things. I'm not going to say if it does end up changing her, but we definitely see her really ponder, is this really it? Is this, what if this is as good as it gets, and yeah, she has a lot of, like, yeah, she has real spirit, she's, I usually think that it's a missed opportunity when you have a female character who has a lot of screen time who doesn't get to have a lot of personality. And this is absolutely not one of those cases. Like, she really, like, I feel like I could write hundreds of words on her character after watching this movie and paying close attention. And, yeah, that brings us to the third member of the love triangle. It's Bob. He's the problem. It's him. We all agree. He severely lacks emotional maturity. And he is, like, I mean, if I had to guess, I'm thinking 20s or maybe 30s, something like that. Like, he should be old enough. But it just hasn't, he hasn't really developed it. And he is a character that I will personally admit I find very frustrating, but it's, again, not a flaw of the film, because people like this do exist. I've never dated someone like that, but I did used to have someone that I think we both considered each other friends. Today I'm not sure I would necessarily use that word. But yeah, just a complete flake, really inconsiderate of others. Like, he has this tendency to just leave suddenly and say, oh, I'm going to the other member of the love triangle, the one I'm not currently with, and he genuinely doesn't seem to really feel that bad, even though it's clearly upsetting to them, and I really appreciate that this is a character that could so easily just have been, like, just essentially evil. Like, this is, I think there's a lot of young people, if they watch this movie today, they'd be like armchair diagnosing him as like a sociopath, and talking about how he love bombs and then withdraws and such. And to be clear, he definitely does do those things, but it genuinely seems like it's very clear he does care about both of them. Like, he'll ask, how was your day? Oh, that must have been tough. Is, like genuinely engage with them. It would be so easy for this film to depict it as purely physical and sexual, and certainly that is an element of it, but it clearly there is emotion there. He doesn't lack that. He just lacks, emotional maturity, And yeah, like, I really appreciate that they put in the effort to make him more of a three-dimensional character. And to be clear, I'm not saying that there are not sociopaths out there. I am saying there are a lot of people today on the internet who will watch like footage from a movie or of a real person and say, oh, that's a sociopath. And that's like, you kind of need to have a conversation with someone before you can really, like, or at least you need more than just like some footage, you know. And it's not necessarily helping as much as, like, I appreciate that a lot of these people are just trying to help. They want others to be able to recognize sociopaths, and they want to recognize them themselves so they don't end up getting hurt. But it does ignore, crap, what was his name again? Elliot Sang has pointed out, you know, a lot of these, you know, manipulative games that some people play in relationships, they're not being played by sociopaths. It's not only sociopaths. A lot of it is by neurotypicals, you know? So we gotta not let them off the hook or misdiagnose them as sociopaths. You know, these things can have real-world consequences. Now, I think that does get us to... So, yeah, pacing, this is definitely a slow burn. Do not expect it to be, you know, I mean, I'm not saying, like, if you know, it's a drama, so it's obviously not going to have, like, car chases or something, but, like, dramas today, and I'll admit, I don't watch that many dramas today. A lot of the most recent movies I watch are more genre pictures, but I do love dramas. I have understood that dramas today, and I've some from what I've seen, some from what I've heard, some of them get very big. You know, there's a tendency today for movies to get bigger than they used to. So that's also something to keep in mind as far as, you know, will you be able to watch this? And to be clear, I'm not judging people who just can't. You know, it's not something that, like, yeah. I'm going to move on. So, let's see. Yeah, the drama does definitely work. It is a deeply emotionally engaging film. It will get to you, you know. Yeah. And I mentioned that it's R-rated. So, this came out fairly early in just the period when you could actually discuss something other than straightness in a mainstream movie, you know, and yeah, it does a really good job. It is very empathetic. It is not saying that there's something wrong with being gay or bi. I'm a little worried that some people might have or do read into this that, like, oh, you know, you can't be with a bisexual because they're never gonna be able to commit and that sort of thing. First of all, that's definitely not true in the real world. That is a, you know, stereotype that is just not true. It's people who don't really understand bisexuality. Like, they're like, well, I could never be bisexual, so they start, like, imagining these fictions instead of just listening to them. You know, like, I follow a number of bisexuals here on YouTube, and yeah, like, they're not any more likely to have multiple partners, and certainly the ones who do, their partners know that it's not exclusive. Like, they engage in polyamory, so do a bunch of straight people, you know. It's not, the problem is not that Bob Elkin is bisexual. It's yeah, he's young and he hasn't really grown up yet. That has nothing to do with bisexuality, you know, and the movie doesn't really imply it because there's other young characters who are not so, you know, immature as him. So yeah, because this is one of those cases where you got to be careful, you know, if you're one character who's bisexual or trans or gay or that, you know, any kind of unusual, you know, quote unquote unusual, you know, there's nothing wrong with any of these identities. There's just a lot of people who haven't encountered or don't know that they've encountered someone like that in the real world, and so they believe what they see in movies. And yeah, if you're one character who belongs to a minority is negatively depicted, that might have some people think, oh, all members of that group are like that. And that's, of course, not the case. But yeah, it's made very, very clear. This is not about bisexuality. I mean, it might as well be 3 gay men or, you know, a man and 2 women or something. You know, it has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that he is clearly bisexual, because he does have sex with both men and women. And the movie isn't shying away from that. It's not, like, gratuitous with sexuality and nudity. Nudity in this movie is basically treated as something like you are naked with your sexual partner. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you might have more than one partner, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. You just gotta make sure that it works on, like, an emotional, you know. And that is something I do appreciate. I have not... I don't know exactly how the polyamorous, the polys feel about this movie. I could imagine a number of them are frustrated with it. I think in the movie's defense, it's not really saying that this thing can't work. It's saying it needs a level of, like, understanding and empathy and willingness to admit that certain things you do can make other people feel bad, and maybe you shouldn't do those things. Maybe you should be willing to apologize if you do them, you know, because both Alex and Daniel are mature about it. You know, it's not that all 3 of them are a complete mess. That would send the message that poly doesn't work, which, again, absolutely not the case. Monogamy does not work for everyone. Polyamory doesn't work for everyone. It's something you gotta, you know... I'm not saying you have to try both, but, like, if you genuinely feel like, you know, one of them makes more sense for you than the other, you know, do some research and see if you can find, you know, a partner or multiple partners, however it may be, who are comfortable with that. You know, again, like, I don't even, I mean, I never was trying to count, but I absolutely do not have a count of how many YouTubers, leftist YouTubers I follow who are very happy with their polyamory, you know, and whose partners, you know, they talk about, you know, their partners also being comfortable with it. But yeah, you know, what nudity and sexuality there is on, like visually in this, it's never shown to, like, arouse the audience. It's just presented as normal. The camera is not ogling them, you know. I know there are some people who watch movies and are like, well, every movie has male gaze. This is one of the ones that really don't. It has just as much interest, which is to say, you know, it's kind of neutral towards it, in male nudity as female nudity, in man-on-man sex as man-on-woman sex. You know, it is truly, the camera is just saying, this is part of many adults' lives. You know, not doing ace erasure here, but yeah, you know, if you are not ace, yeah, if you're able to have a, you know, more or less, you know, happy romantic relationship with at least one other person, yeah, there might be sex. And that's just, like, it's treating it the same. Like, something I noticed multiple times when there's nudity, it's actually people being like, oh, it's too cold here, and then getting under, you know, getting naked and getting under the covers. Like, it doesn't really distinguish between, you know, ooh, sexy naked body, and just like, oh, it's cold, you know. So yeah, just it's just a fact of life, you know. Sometimes it's cold, sometimes adults have sex with each other, and I really think this is, I'm not saying every single movie has to have it this way. You know, I'm quite fond of when a sex scene communicates something very, very directly. When this movie was made, that wasn't so much, it kind of was just, okay, these 2 people are now having sex, you know. But I do appreciate that it's not gratuitous in the slightest. And I don't think I want to give anything away about anything else that got it an R rating, other than, yeah, I'll just briefly say, yeah, the swearing also feels natural. It's like, okay, this person is frustrated, so they're gonna swear, you know? Yeah, it doesn't feel like it was written by a 13-year-old who just learned to say fuck, you know? Yeah, I think that does cover, yeah, just a really, really great look into, you know, these very real feeling people's lives. Yeah, like, I'd say basically everything in this movie feels like it could have happened to someone in the real world, and the movie isn't saying, and they're evil for it having happened to them, or they're innocent and, you know, it happened. And no, like, there's a scene, I'm not going to give away details, but there's a scene where a character literally says, I made a mistake, I'm partly to blame for this. And, you know, I was sitting there and thinking, yeah, you know, and that's not because they're a bad person and I'm like better than them or something. I've made mistakes in my life. Fuck knows I've made mistakes in my life, but you try to learn from them, and that's the thing. Like, watching this movie and seeing, you know, some of them learn and some of them not learn, and just like, it's not about role models. It's not about someone being punished for being bad. It's just real people making mistakes and trying to make life work. And yeah, the fact that, you know, one of them is a gay man, one of them is a bisexual man, that's not like the center of the universe here. That's just another aspect of their lives, you know? So it has this very effective normalizing effect, and that is like, we gotta normalize it. We gotta just get to a place where we, right, I guess I meant to, that's another thing I meant to say at the start of this video. Fuck. I am not a member of the LGBTQ plus, henceforth LGBT. I'm not meaning to exclude anyone. It just rolls off the tongue better. I am aware that some allies feel comfortable using the Q word. I am not currently, so LGBT is what I go with. But I'm not a member of the community. I try to be as good of an ally as I can be. But yeah, to my fellow cishets, we gotta get better at the, you know, I think I've gotten to a place where I'm pretty good at it, but I will admit I wasn't always. I've made insensitive remarks in the past. I'm working really hard to not do that anymore, and to try to make up for it, you know. And yeah, you know, it's movies like this that can really help. Just like, I'm sure there are bigots who tried to watch this, and the moment they realized, ooh, not everyone's straight, they balked and hopefully cleaned up after themselves. But I think people who are open-minded enough, and can, you know, watch a movie this old, you know, hopefully, I'm sure there are movies more recent than this that also have a similar, but yeah, I mean, hypothetically, you could rewrite this to be, you know, essentially, if Bob was straight and Dan was a woman, you know, you could have much the same movie by and large. And I do appreciate, you know, some would say, well, that means that it's not good enough for representation, but I lean very heavily towards, and this is not, I'm not saying, I'm not trying to explain anything here. I am leaning on, I'm afraid I don't remember who, but some YouTubers who are members of the LGBT community have expressed, you know, we need these movies that just normalize, that just say, hey, just human beings just trying to live, you know. It's not about, like, AIDS or, you know, oh, these gay people just can't be happy, and these various things that used to be how, you know, homosexuality was treated in cinema. And yeah, you know, it's, well, okay, I suppose in the 70s it wouldn't have been about AIDS. I guess that was more like 80s and 90s. certainly there were AIDS movies in the 90s. And that, again, that was definitely something that needed to happen. But there are a number of people who watched so many of those movies and ended up thinking, oh, so all gay men have AIDS and I should be careful around. I mean, they deserve sympathy, and I'm aware I can like shake their hand, give them a hug, or that sort of thing. But you can still hug Cartman just like you used to. But it's just not it ends up making it feel like every gay individual's entire life is all about AIDS, when, like, AIDS was terrible, to be sure, and fuck Reagan for not doing very much about it until he was forced to. But it is important to have, again, leaning on LGBT, I wouldn't be saying it if I didn't agree with it, but I would also not be saying it if I didn't know that there were LGBT, people who felt that way. I'm not trying to impose my opinion on anyone when it comes to those sorts of things. I try to only do that when it comes to white cishet male specific things, since that is my identity. But yeah, it's really great to have movies like this where, yeah, it's just one aspect of their identity. They're not only their, Daniel is not only gay, Bob is not only bisexual. They have other traits that have nothing to do with those aspects of themselves. Yeah, 8 messy love triangles with an LGBT twist out of 10. And that brings us to the spoiler section. So from here on out, passengers are asked to note that the spoiler sign is now active and to fasten your seatbelts. Yeah, let's get into the spoilers. So we're immediately introduced to Dr. Daniel Hirsch and the way that he has a quite normal job as a doctor, because quite a few doctors will tell you every so often they have to deal with someone who's indecisive or a hypochondriac or both. And this one is, of course, both. He doesn't skip a beat between being convinced it's cancer and he's about to die and the doctor's keeping something from him to, well, I mean, I gotta go to Brussels, Frankfurt, other places named after food, obviously, but yeah, I love that before we even, like, if you go into this movie not knowing who is, part of the love triangle and all, you might not immediately realize Dr. Hirsch is a gay man who's part of the love triangle, because that's not all he is. He is also a doctor who works really hard and has some very difficult patients, so it's such a great, because there's so many movies that would have, like, because imagine, you could so easily have had, the first thing we see, Hirsch wakes up in bed next to Bob, Dan smiles, Bob is like, oh, I gotta go see Alex, and then it would primarily be perceived as, oh, that's what it's about, but that's his identity. He pines for Bob. And yeah, we also see the way that Bob and Dan's relationship is somewhat strained by Dan having a job and Bob being impatient and kind of just going with whatever he feels like, even when it hurts other people. And it's very nicely done the way both Dan and Alex's face light up when it comes to Bob. I feel really bad for the phone lady who has to put up with Dan taking his frustration over Bob's behavior out on her. And we also see immediately, as soon as we meet Alex, she's not the most organized person in the world. I don't drink coffee, but I understand that the way she makes coffee right before leaving is considered the very best way to make a cup of coffee, provided you want it to be absolutely terrible. And I like that she actually asks the phone lady about traffic. Like, I don't remember phone ladies. I'm not sure they even existed anymore when I was born. I think they've been replaced by, just calling people directly. But I guess according to this, they were kind of like Google, or at least treated like it by some people. It's just, yeah, I'm sorry. I can hardly even imagine calling someone who's like dealing with my phone messages and asking, how's traffic? Like, I don't know. Look, can't you check somewhere else? Like, I get, I appreciate she's not gonna get like her smartphone out and go on the internet and check. Like I'm aware that 1971 was a completely different time. Again, like 54 years ago. Obviously, Wi-Fi was notoriously bad back then, so that's not what she's gonna do. And let's see. But yeah, traffic really must have been terrible for her to be 2 hours late. She shows up just as they're leaving. Any later and she would have missed them entirely. I'm like half kidding here. I'm pretty sure they were specifically waiting to leave when she arrived. And I don't know. I guess Bob is not nothing. And they talk about the economic troubles in England. I gotta say, I thought Brexit happened much more recently than this movie setting. Maybe it's actually set today. I agree. That kid sounds like someone's mother-in-law. I mean, I don't know whether to be impressed or kind of saddened by what I guess is her lack of faith in Alex's ability, or maybe she's just trying to be really independent. Like, kids, I don't know the exact age, but there are, there's a number of kids who at a certain age will try to like run things, try to grow up. And the kids don't have as much in the way of like boundaries. And to be clear, I'm not one of those people who think that you should be like hard on your kids. Absolutely not. But I do think, and that's one place where this is also, willing to criticize hippie values, because, we're seeing that the free love is not working out for two of the three, and we're also seeing, these kids, not a lot of boundaries, and they're not really behaving that well. Like, one of them walks up and, like, starts typing on the keyboard, like, I don't know, maybe he was reincarnated from a cat that lost all its 9 lives or something. But that's like, you cannot do that, and you see him, like, he doesn't even bother saying, can you control your kids or something. He just tiredly, takes out the paper, curls it up, starts over, because that's how it is if he's going to be at that place. Let's see. It's quite nicely done the way that when Dan has Bob on the phone, he really lights up, but he's also desperately trying to convince Bob to stay just a little longer so they can have the conversation a little later, in the doctor's office, when he's on the phone in the doctor's office, yeah. And it's also kind of messed up to be calling someone at their job if it's not an emergency, especially if they're a doctor. And, this poor patient is like, should I stay or should I go? And yeah, just like, his office hours, like, just give him some time, or leave a message at his home phone or something, if you simply cannot stay. Like, there could be although with Bob it's usually not that he really needs to go. Yeah, and when Dan calls Bob and doesn't get an answer, then we get this bit of him thinking about, yeah, I already described it in the review. The breakfast has the amusing bit where they come very close to drinking mother's milk. Thankfully, that wasn't what they poured. It was the other milk, because they're that unused to the idea of taking care of kids. Like, yeah, I'm sorry, but there's a baby in the house. Maybe consider that at least one of those milk things might be, like, I mean, an argument could be made that she should have, like, marked it clearly or told them before leaving, but then Alex was 2 hours late and Bob is flaky, so maybe that's how that, you know, it's one of those things. I can see both points of view, you know. I think both of them are partly to blame. And that actually, yeah, I just realized I actually forgot to put that in my note, so I'll say it here. I really appreciated Alex being willing to admit that, and again, this is not judgment. I've actually made this mistake myself. You gotta make sure when you're forming a relationship, and I'm not calling anyone out here, I'm not even gonna say what kind of relationship or with whom or anything, or when in my life it happened, so no one should feel like targeted here. You gotta, early in the relationship, set boundaries, and if the other person doesn't respect the boundaries, you know, try to have a conversation, and if they're just not willing to change, you may have to break off the relationship, because it's not healthy. You're just, it's not going to get better. You're not going to get more okay with it. You're just going to feel worse about your decision. And I really loved her willingness to say it. And the fact that, you know, for all the depth, I mentioned in the review, they managed to give Bob a lot of depth. He doesn't seem to really understand. You know, he just, because, yeah, afterwards he's like, oh, hey, take care of my parakeet. You know, that's such a weird, why would you ask your ex for that? Like, he's acting like he doesn't really understand that they're broken up, maybe. Or just like, she's in his life. Like, he has friends. We've seen his friends. He invited them to Alex's sister and all. Now, let's see. I feel really bad for the dog. Just in general in this movie. This is not a movie you watch if you're just, like, if you cannot handle seeing a dog in any kind of distress, because just, yeah. And again, it's not like criticism of the movie. These are things that happen, you know. But yeah, you know, Alex is like yelling at it. It's like, I mean, the dog's not trying to do anything wrong. Yeah. And Bob makes several evasive maneuvers. I think it especially bothers me when he hears her say that the only reason they're even doing this babysitting thing is so they would finally have an entire weekend together. And he doesn't just come out and say, actually, he's going to spend some time with Dan. And it just, like, clearly she thought that, so he let her think that he would be there for the entire weekend. It's also just weird to, like, just up and leave children like that. I mean, he's not leaving them alone, but still, like, babysitting is kind of something you commit to, especially if you're saying, oh, the entire weekend. Yeah, you shouldn't just up and leave. Like, it's young children should be able to have, like, be able to form connections with you know, those taking care of them. They shouldn't have, like, obviously sometimes it's just going to be a babysitter for a night or something, but if the kids are without their parents for an entire weekend, yeah, the people showing up to babysit should be there until their parents return. Let's see. Yeah, he also doesn't spend very long saying goodbye to Alex right before leaving for Daniel. It's very clear he's one of those people who just doesn't want to get attached. He just wants to have fun, which, as long as you're open with your partner about that, is fine, but he isn't open with him. He keeps just avoiding the issue until right before he leaves. Like, that's the behavior of someone who knows that they're doing things that are not quite right. Let's see. And again, just, like, yeah, watching this movie really took me back to when I had to deal with a flake for a while. Anyway, there's a lot of really great stuff in the scene with the nervous breakdown. Like, basically, she should be talking to a therapist, not just a regular doctor. And deep down, she doesn't really want to take his advice anyway. She says he's not married. How could he know? As if he doesn't have access to studies on these things. And then she rejects the idea of her living apart from her husband, even though that situation has brought her to tears and to see a doctor on a Saturday. It sounds like, you know, it sounds to me like it's going to take much more of her talking to people before she's willing to make a change. And she needs to make some kind of change, you know. And let's see. Yeah, and also, really appreciate the way, the casual way they discuss the other issue. He comes just short of saying, "So how's your sex life?" And basically, they're not having sex, but she doesn't really want it. He's never forced himself on her. This really does not sound like a happy marriage. They're not happy now. Maybe they never were. And she does also say, well, he had a house, so I guess let's get married. It's financial stability, I guess. But just, yeah. Let's see. And it's one of those things, like, in reality, again, unless you're ace, not doing ace erasure, women do have sex drive, same as men. There's just a lot who are taught, socialized to repress it, and that was very much the case back in the 70s. So, and also based on her, like, age, when it's set in the 70s, her generation were taught, the women didn't really have sexual needs. So, yeah, they're probably both sexually frustrated. And let's see. Yeah, she feels like it's too late to start over, which is not a good reason to stay with something bad. But yeah, that was also a time when it was difficult for women to make a living on their own. So yeah, basically she would have to marry someone else, and a lot of men are not willing to marry a woman that's, of her age. It is very sweet when the two men kiss, and we learn the art installation was set up by Bob. He wants to make an even bigger one. He claims he won't be in America for long, but, I mean, come on. That's, yeah. And yeah, in the breakfast in bed scene, we hear that the kids watch their parents take showers, and they also always bring a tray for breakfast in bed. In my multiple viewings of this movie, I have never understood if, before recognizing the smell of pot smoke, if they didn't notice the kids blatantly passing something to smoke on, like maybe not tobacco, but something back and forth, or if they were more okay with it being tobacco than weed. I don't know. It feels slightly weirdly staged to me. I think it's like the one bit of, where the direction didn't completely work for me. Like, if the kids are facing them, a kid with a smoke in their hand and mouth is a pretty distinct visual. If they wanted this to work as her not having seen the smoking, you would have had to have the kids slightly further away and facing away. I don't know enough about weed to say whether or not it's okay for kids to smoke. I'm going to tell you to check what the science says. I agree with the consensus there. Certainly, I know there are a number of adults who've seen benefits from smoking weed. I'm also not sure about the issue of the kids seeing their parents naked, showering. Again, whatever the science says, that's what I agree with. Let's see. But that does also feel very hippie. And then Daniel has to deal with a call from a woman who asked for his medical advice, got it, didn't follow it, and is now again asking instead of just doing the thing he said. Yeah, these are very common experiences for doctors from patients of all genders. It's not just, I think it's more that, like, because keep in mind, it's not only the female patients and loved ones. We have the hypochondriac in the first scene also, he's a man. But, there are a number of times where, because of how the genders are socialized, it's the woman, making contact with the doctor. The man is like, I'm fine. And then eventually he's not fine. And then suddenly he's fucking dead. If the woman doesn't call, sometimes behind his back. So that's why we're seeing it. But we are seeing both men and women, be difficult patients. And yeah, the bit with Bob, on top of Daniel is also sweet. For how much sadness there is in this, I do appreciate that they are given at least a little bit of tenderness also. And it is crucial for the movie to work. This is the kind of thing that, if there was not these little brief bits, we would not understand why they're even with Bob. Like, just, I don't know. There is some about his personality as well. I'll grant that. But overall, it wouldn't quite be enough. But when we see them together, you know, sexually, physically, caressing each other and that sort of thing, we really understand, you know, and that's also where we see, yeah, it's not, you know, you might expect Bob to just be like, I don't want to cuddle, let's just have sex, and then he leaves immediately after. But no, he does actually want this tenderness. You know, it's one of those things, like, we're seeing a very early, you know, sadly, in some ways, it's much worse today. It's this thing of, like, basically, capitalism says that we should be able to get whatever we want, whenever we want, provided we can, like, pay, you know. And, yeah, it's worse today on account of social media and such. I'm not saying everything about it is bad. I'm saying there are aspects that are bad. But yeah, that's very much what we see. You know, if he's like around people who are yelling at each other, he'll just fucking leave. You know, and just, yeah. Right. I also really, I just realized I didn't add to my notes, but I really like the thing with, you know, Alex saying, if you think back on this, and you won't. That was also a great shot with, like, the back of the chair taking up a lot of the frame. And then she'll, like, turn so we can see her face and him in the background and such. And then she'll turn back to, like, yeah, really, really nicely done, you know. And again, the kind of thing that a lot of studios would be like, you can't do that. We have to be able to see the actors all the time. Let's see. And you know, there is distance between them. There is a barrier between them. And there's some of the time a barrier between us and him. So it works really well. It communicates something. It's not just to be like, you can't see. I appreciate trolling in movies. I can never remember if it was it Fellini or was it Tarkovsky? But one of them, like, added a scene that was, like, deliberately slow, just so that people who were not gonna have the patience for that would leave the movie early. And, like, I don't know. I'm torn on it. I've seen people discuss, you know, some make a case for it, some make a case against it. Both of them fans of art movies, but yeah, I don't know. I can kind of respect trolling your audience like that. It's got to be frustrating to make, you know, these incredible movies and then for people to say, I don't know, it was kind of long. Do you think there was a reason for it? Do you think there was something in there that needed that time? Like, I gotta watch more Tarkovsky. I've only watched Andrei Rublev, and I know I probably mispronounced the last name there, and Solaris, but they're both so fucking good, and you don't have to cut down either of them. You know, they're long movies because there's a lot there. You know, there's other movies, like, sometimes I'll watch an American, you know, popcorn fast food movie and be like, oh, thank fuck, it's like 90 minutes or less. I don't want a, you know, Freddy or Jason movie to be longer than 90 minutes. Wait, was there at least one Freddy movie that was longer, but I think it ended up working because it was one of the ones that Wes Craven, R.I.P., directed, maybe. Anyway, moving on. Let's see. So the where do we have the? Yeah, we also see with Bob right after the shower. You know, yeah, it is clearly in part physical and sexual, although they do also laugh at his jokes and such. And yeah, right after Dan says he wonders how Bob got away, it smash cuts to Alex eating some of the dessert, reading a book, crying. She tries to play with one of the kids, and it's clear, like, it's for her own benefits. Like, she's trying to make herself feel better. The kid wants to play by herself. And then the mother-in-law kid does that thing that kids will sometimes do where they say the unvarnished truth even when it's absolutely not welcome. Like, just like, you're eating it, it's for all of us. When is Bob coming back? You don't know, do you? Is that why you're eating and crying and reading a book by yourself? Just like, wow. Yeah. I'm sure with age she'll get better at, yeah. Yeah, I cannot help but notice that both of Bob's partners eat sweets when thinking about it. Okay, candy, whatever. I'm watching a British movie. I heard a lot of British. Anyway, But yeah, thinking about him when he isn't there, which I appreciate, could mean positive feelings like, oh, sweetness, but it definitely, at least some of the time, seems to mean that they wish they could spend more time with him, which again is his fault. He has to either figure out a way that his two partners are okay with, or just choose one and spend time with that one instead of, yeah, how this is going, because like there is such a thing as like comfort eating. It's not wrong to eat candy at some point during the day. I do that. Love me some sugar, but it works well. And now I'm fucking rationalizing. It works well if I eat a little bit of candy right before I start recording, because more energy and makes the video at least have some chance of being engaging for the audience. But it is also possible that for some situations it can be comfort eating, and clearly at least some of the time is here. Like, she's starting to eat the fudge before it's even cold. Like, you can see her. It's such a great detail. I can imagine that was in the script. She touches it and she's like, oh, ow, and she touches it, takes a little bit, and yeah, like she so badly wants something to comfort her. And it should be him. He shouldn't have treated her like that. And then the fuse box blows a fuse or two, and you can see Alex not very fond of the animals. I feel bad for the, ape, monkey, I can never remember. It's also clearly scared of the dark. It's not trying to attack her or something. And I do also appreciate, it's also scary for her that this creature is suddenly on her in the dark. But again, we see, the frustration that Bob causes his two partners, they take out on others. And to be clear, I'm not saying that he blew the fuse, but, if he had been there, she wouldn't have been as upset. And she understandably is very annoyed with him when he comes back. And he doesn't even try to apologize. After the shower, he insults her. Yeah. Yeah, he just says it's all he has to give, and she points out, maybe you're spread too thin. And she is also right. He's risking electrocuting himself if he doesn't turn off the main switch, when switching fuses. Let's see. And yeah, then we have the guy who knows Dan, and Dan claims to not remember, but does, of course, and he hits his hand repeatedly on the car window and then complains it hurts. Gee, I wonder why, genius. And the cop is, of course, about to arrest the young guy, but Dan covers for him. Very big of him. He really does have a big heart. I guess it's not impossible that he's worried this guy's going to tell the cops that Dan is gay and might hurt Dan's career or something. And yeah, Dan can't hide that he's in love. The young guy picks up on it, ends up running off with his doctor's bag while Dan is trying to get medication from the pharmacy. He because he hurt his hand by, harassing Dan, completely. But yeah, some people do behave like that. And that's, again, like, there was a time, like, clearly this guy is not straight. There was a time where that was the only depiction of gay men, and I'm not going to pretend, like, yes, I don't know how it is today, but there have been decades where in certain Western countries, countries here in the West, there were issues with, young gay men, using drugs and having a bit too casual sex and such, and it's not because they're gay or something. It's because of the ostracization they faced. Let's see, but yeah, in the pharmacy we can clearly see at least some of the people are addicted to one substance or another, hoping to somehow score, maybe just standing there because that way they're close to what they want, even if they can't quite get it. And it just makes you think, like, if only the American government could brutalize more drug users, monopolize selling large quantities of drugs, these people could easily be helped. But somehow, because of all these know-nothing lefties who look at reality, we can't do that because they'd rather treat addicts with humanity. And then we get to Sunday with the little... right, and if it's not clear by now, yeah, this movie does not have anything to do with Bloody Sunday, despite the title. Anyway, where we? Yes, yeah, we get to Sunday, a little moment of the two men both having gotten to the same paper, so they swap one. Dan tries to relate to the guy, his own neighbor, but of course, city life being what it is, it's a bit of an uphill battle. I'm not saying everything is better outside of the city. And it's probably also the fact that the neighbor just saw a headline with something about nude au pair girls. So yeah, even back then, there was this kind of crap in the... Like, I'm not saying we shouldn't know anything about that, but like a major headline on the front page, it's like... It's sensationalist, you know? I sincerely doubt that that article is about, you know, these are human beings and we should, you know, treat them. It's probably going to be salacious. To sell more papers. Again, one of the flaws of capitalism. But yeah, we see Bob, Alex, and the kids, including mother-in-law girl, who earlier caught Alex eating some of the dessert before the others, and she's like, you know, yeah, Alex explains, listen, mother-in-law girl, I'm only eating fudge because that fudger eats. And yeah, for a lot of their time out, it does go quite well. They all wave goodbye to the balloons. At least one of the kids seems jealous of the older kids vandalizing cars. By the way, one of those is actually a teenage Daniel Day-Lewis in his first role. He described it as heaven to be paid to vandalize cars. I think he's actually the one whose face you very briefly see. And yeah, like, I'm sorry, if I had only watched this movie and you told me, oh yeah, that kid, the vandal there, he's gonna grow up to be like one of the best method actors of all time, I might not believe you. I might think you've been smoking some of the pot the kids smoke, but yeah, I mean, it's undeniable. He's incredibly talented. I haven't watched everything he's done, but my God, he is amazing. I think I will, at some point, do at least one of the movies that he plays a major role in, because some of them, yeah, I have some of them on DVD and have things to say. But it might be a while. Don't hold your breath. I have so many fucking movies I want to get to. It's, yeah. Anyway, and yeah, I mean, certainly when you see one kid's face, he does look strikingly what I imagine Daniel Day-Lewis looked like as a teenager. Like, that's what a computer would spit out if you asked what would he look like as a teenager. And then mother-in-law kid decides it's time to go home, and in what is the first case of a clear lack of being responsible, she runs with the dog that's not on a leash. They cross the street without waiting for cars to pass by, and that is a scene where I will admit Bob does handle it pretty well. Best I could tell, the driver was at least slightly careless there, and the two of them take care of the dead dog. And I'm slightly unsure. I wouldn't rule out they might have trained the dog to play dead and then carried it, because otherwise that's an incredibly realistic fake dog. The way that the weight and the legs move and this kind of stuff. Like, for back then, like today you could do it. No problem if you had the money, time, hired the right person to do it. But that definitely would be a clever way to do it, because you don't need the dog to look that different from normal. You just need it to not move, and that is something you can train a dog to. But yeah, good thinking. Get the kids away before moving the dog so they're not thinking too much about it, though clearly it is still on mother-in-law kid's mind later. But yeah, I mean, Alex was, you know, I use the term unironically. I look forward to when I don't even have to say that. She was triggered. It triggered her anxiety, and she couldn't really handle it, so Bob had to take charge. And that's not a man-woman thing. That's, you know, she was clearly, you know, it was trauma. She had been traumatized earlier by a similar, you know, did it happen, or was it just she was afraid? There was some kind of fear that it triggered, you know, because we get a flashback and everything. It's not, I don't think it's like outright PTSD. Okay, maybe it is PTSD, actually, thinking about it, because she's like knocked out. She sleeps for hours after. Yeah, and this was a time when there was some understanding of PTSD. But yeah, also a great game they play with the drawing. I think it's called An Exquisite Corpse. And yeah, some of my favorite Drawfee episodes are Exquisite Corpses. I wish they would do this more often, but I get there's a lot. They get so many suggestions. But yeah, Bob handles that entire thing better than Alex does, with her shouting at this clearly already upset and guilty feeling child, and starting to do so before she's right in front of the kid. Like, yeah, obviously the kid's gonna run, and she might actually get run over now. Thankfully, that doesn't end up happening. But yeah, because the car is right there. There's not gonna be another car, right? Just run up to her, But yeah, this scene shows Alex is not ready for prime time, and by prime time, I do of course mean babysitting. She needs someone to watch her, at least. A babysitter's babysitter. But yeah, we do see, she pictures mother-in-law kid having been run over. There's a flashback with Alex as a child running to get her father the gas mask she forgot. And we do see later he is still very much alive, so most likely this was like a nightmare she had as a kid. And yeah, after, yeah, we have the thing with Alex sleeping for hours because of the trauma. Bob does at least insist she not take pills, which, yeah, absolutely true. Please do not take pills. Just, if you feel like it might help, but you're not actually hurt, like there's not really gonna be a pill right there in the cabinet to help you with this recent trauma. Like, I don't know exactly what she would take, but it would not be for that. I mean, she needs to talk to someone about this, clearly. Let's see, but yeah, he's right about the pills, but then he calls and invites over his buddies, and they brainstorm about the device that we also saw him mimic with the drawing while she was in bed. And now Alva and her husband have to prepare food for 9 people, including the understandably incredibly bored 2 hippie girls. It's this thing of like, yeah, I mean, Alva and her husband are too permissive. Like, I'm sorry, no, you don't just invite over people when like they just got home from like finally having a weekend to themselves, and then immediately it's like, oh, can you cook for 9 fucking people even though you didn't know? Like, let's see, he invited like 4, I think. There were 2 guys and 2 girls, so it's like, yeah, they were okay with cooking for the babysitters, but like, and of course the kids and the professor that's always around them, but they didn't like, and suddenly he's just there. And yeah, that is the thing. Like, for sure, the hippie movement could sometimes be a little too like, it's okay, because this is like, it's obviously it's a good thing to make sure people get enough to eat. So they're like, okay, this is healthy, this is making the world a better place. Yes, but it is okay to say no. If you're going to invite that many people, they're going to have to take care of food for themselves, and yeah, like, clearly, Alva and her husband, it is a little too much for them, but they're just not quite willing to admit it. The kids are not quite well raised enough, and like, yeah. Let's see, I think that does bring us to, but yeah, I mean, I guess at least he asks for Alex's opinion on the matter when they're talking about if you go mobile or stationary. And then as they're driving, she's thinking they're going to go home together. And he just suddenly says, oh, let me out here. I'll grab a cab. Goodbye. Don't know when I'll see you again. And then even does like a funny wave from the cab, because to him this is not a bad thing. He genuinely either doesn't like, yeah, I would say he doesn't understand, but he does, because she already said it. He just doesn't really care that this is upsetting to her. Yeah, he knows because earlier he was the one who brought up, when he got back from Daniel's, like, she was upset, and he knew it was because of Daniel. She didn't mention Daniel's name. He did. And then we have her going home alone. She finds the mess just where she left it, including the cigarette thing. And the ashtray, yeah. And yeah, we get a nice visual metaphor that she does get rid of the cigarette butts and such. And that was also, as she's like leaving, she's leaving a little late, and there's traffic and all this stuff, and then she drops the ashtray, and she can barely make coffee in time for the this whole thing. Like, yeah, it's not working for her. Dan is overworked, but overall reasonably happy. He likes socializing. He, he's not constantly sad when Bob isn't around. Alex is the one more in need of changing something, and by the end, she's realized that, and she's making the change. I mean, she's agreeing to, or she's going to take care of the parakeet, but that doesn't mean that she's going to get back together with him. Let's see. I think that does. Yeah. So anyway, she does get rid of the cigarette butts and such, but all the ash that's now on the carpet, she just kind of grinds it further into the carpet. I'm not saying it wouldn't be incredibly annoying to have to clean up, but I just feel like the fact that it's showing us this means that it's a visual metaphor for her emotional state. Like, she'll get some of it cleared out so other people can't tell, but it's still there. The ash is in the carpet. The pain of Bob's constant carelessness about her emotional state and not spending very much time with her, it does hurt, even if you might not immediately be able to see it, or it doesn't look as bad as it is. It just, yeah, really, really nicely done. Because, like, the entire thing with the ashtray, like, the coffee thing by itself is enough to convey to us, yeah, this is not, her life is a little bit of a mess right now. Let's see, I think, yeah, then we see her, she has a meal with her parents. We see this very credible, common discussion between mother and daughter about the father, how much they as women, should ask of, husband or father, and mother thinks the relationship with Bob not being more definite is Alex's fault. Sadly, very common for people to blame women for bad things men do. And of course, when women do to other women, that's internalized misogyny. She doesn't even ask. She just assumes it must be Alex's fault that it's not working out. In reality, of course, a lot of the time it's the man who's unwilling to commit, whereas women, there's a lot of pressure on them to commit because for a very long time, most of human society, they were not granted independence. A job, a bank account, credit card, stuff like that. And keep in mind, there's a lot of men out there who are absolutely terrible with money, so a number of women have had to deal with constant worry that he would spend all of the money they were both relying on. And I do appreciate the point made that how a woman judges her father has a lot of impact on how she judges potential mates, although the mother posits this basically as an inherent negative, which is pretty ridiculous. Obviously, you have to have standards for your partner. And yeah, a lot of the time that starts with how you relate to one or both of your parents. And it is true that, based on what we see, it's not an awful lot, but it's just enough. Yeah, her father does not do much and not enough to take care of her needs or her mother's needs, and yeah, through that she's able to see, Bob is not enough for her. Let's see, I do appreciate that apparently Alex's mother would be okay with a hippie, and she does accurately identify several of the best aspects of the, the far left hating competition and such. Does that sound like I'm blowing smoke up my own ass, trying to make myself seem great? I guess what I'm saying is that's part of why I love the far left, why I'm part of it. And the fact that conservatives today, especially in America, and that is the country I focus most on, are frequently these bitter, angry people who just want to hurt minorities in the zero-sum game of, well, someone has to suffer, ignoring our carefully thought out and well-explained methods of improving things so the suffering can be significantly limited. In some areas, nearly completely eliminated, and right now they're complaining about Trump and Musk, which they should, but they're complaining even though they did exactly what they said they would. Musk and Trump did. So, yeah, they never thought lovebirds would eat their face. It was very sweet when mother-in-law kids said goodnight to Alex and thanking her for babysitting. And not necessarily what you expect, considering her reaction to the dog being run over. And we see Alex continue to try to write the letter of resignation. And it is, again, this thing, like, yeah, she really struggles to leave behind things she doesn't like. And, near the end, Bob even points out, well, why, if you don't have a job here and you don't really have plans here, why are you still here? And she can't really answer it. She's not done growing by the end of the movie, but it is true that her going with him to America would not make things better. He's just going to find someone else to there's going to be another love triangle. I'm sure, after the events of this movie, he found two people in America and had another messy love triangle and kept going until eventually maybe he gets burnt out or maybe actually grows up. Now, let's see. Alex is talking to George, who insists that it's people like her leading to people his age getting fired. She maintains it's because he lied and invented a degree that he didn't have. And like with so many other things in this movie, I think it's probably some of both. But the conversation does upset her. I think it's when he says she's pretty and she thinks about Bob and how he keeps blowing her off, and the fact that she could, like, if there was a man who wanted her, who was willing to commit, she could. And then he does that really obnoxious thing that some men do when a woman is showing emotion and tells her to stop. Like, dude, you're expressing your emotion, but she's not allowed to. Like, it's fine to say, is there anything I could do to help, or do you need a moment alone, or something, but anyway. They do end up having sex. Probably the fact that both are struggling, both said one or two nice things to each other. Sometimes that can lead to sex, even if both people are already in a relationship and they might not even particularly like each other. Let's see. And this thing of he still hasn't told his wife that he's been fired and he doesn't know how to break it to her. Communication is obviously a major theme here. Men especially not telling the women in their lives, hey, so this is how things are right now. Let's see. Yeah, and Bob refuses to wait even a few rings and instead just leaves a message, and like, the woman taking their messages is like, I mean, I told him you were probably there. I don't know why he didn't wait, But yeah, again, he's so flaky. Would he be a fuckboy by today's verbiage, or do fuckboys not do anything to take care of the other person's emotions? I don't know enough of it. I don't date, so I don't really. And a lot of the time when people talk about this, they're talking about a fucking reality TV show. And there's just, I mean, why would I think about reality television when I mean, right in this very room, there are walls I could be banging my head into, And let's see. But yeah, he said he just leaves a message, and basically he's already on the way. Let's see, he doesn't want to be around Daniel anymore because people were arguing because he's a child. And they were playing charades, which is genuinely so much fun. And it was great to, and that's such a great moment. I love that we get to see Dan be happy when Bob isn't there. Like, I get that he's oh, wait, fuck, was Bob? No, that was before Bob arrived, wasn't it? That they were doing... Was he there? Fuck, anyway. It wasn't only Bob there, and he wasn't, like, constantly looking at Bob. He was doing the charades at other people also, and, getting super into it. It's so much fun. Like, charades is very much one of those things of, like, you're either, like, gonna really go for it, or you're just not gonna have any fun. Like, it's more fun if you go for it and you suck at it than if you're like, ooh, I don't know, I probably wouldn't be very good at it. I wasn't very good at it, but we had fun, like, oh, fuck. It's been over 20 years since I last played charades, but it was so much fucking fun. Anyway, yeah. The arguing couple, it was Bob who let them in. Like, if he has such a big problem with them arguing, maybe, I mean, I'm sorry, but if I was in this situation, I would probably just have said, hey, looks like maybe she's a bit drunk. Maybe the two of you should go home instead. Like, literally, the moment that they see and hear this couple can tell this is going to escalate, this, this argument. And it's no wonder Dan gets really angry with them afterwards. Let's see. And her anger at the husband who is cheating or might, and the conversation between Alex and her mom about if marriage is ever about anything other than property really helps to really underline the theme of the movie of sometimes it hurts a lot to be in a relationship with someone, monogamous or otherwise. Not all people can do monogamy, and yeah, like, there's a lot of people in this where they don't have a completely healthy romantic relationship. I mean, even if he's not cheating, the fact that he is staring, and I suppose it's not impossible that he's not staring, that she is, again, people of all genders can sometimes get like over, excited about, maybe it's not going on. I'm not making any excuses, to be clear. I believe women 100%, but it definitely is, he shouldn't be doing that. He should, yeah. And I mean, yeah, I'm sorry, but if they can't even have, what was it, like a babysitter or something? If they can't even have a babysitter without it causing this huge of an argument, I'm sorry, maybe at the very least they need therapy. Maybe it's better if they break up, or at least spend some time apart and then try again. But yeah, instead, no, she gets super fucking drunk and then, just, yeah. And yeah, like the moment that she's like, oh, you're playing kids games, I'm like, fuck. Like, just, Jesus Christ, party pooper. Anyway, let's see. Yeah, and Alex, yeah, what the fuck? Did it just delete my notes? Jesus fucking Christ. Okay, okay, I believe I remember what I said. So, fuck. Is that, no, yeah, this is it. Yeah, so, okay. Alex, yeah, there's the thing about, George, yeah, because Bob just comes over as if he lives there. He wants to be able to go into their homes. He does it multiple times. At the end, he just goes into the place and lies in the bed, and then he doesn't say goodbye afterwards properly. But he doesn't want the responsibilities that come with, So yeah, he comes over. George is still there, and George is like, this is not gonna go well. He's younger than me. He can fuck me up if he wants to, but Alex says, no, you should meet each other, and at first it seems like Bob is jealous, but apparently he was just curious, and yeah, Alex was trying to make him jealous. She wants him to realize that what he's doing is hurting her so that he'll stop. She did already explain it to him verbally. Now she's trying another tactic. This is very common in the real world as well, when a man refuses to listen to one of the women in his life when she keeps bringing up something he's doing or saying that's hurting her. Yeah, she might try to demonstrate or otherwise get the point across. I've heard a lot of misogynists say, women never tell men what's wrong. I've seen significant evidence that it's more that a lot of men refuse to listen to women when they explain what's wrong, and in actuality, it's more common for men to not explain what's wrong to other men and women and such, and then get mad when the rest of us aren't fucking mind readers. Let's see, and, yeah, it's part of our socialization. It's not an inborn quality. I'm not some fucking gender essentialist. Hate that shit. It's complete fucking bullshit. Please don't buy it for a second. There's a lot of people here on YouTube who'll explain why it's bullshit. But yeah, Women are socialized to communicate, empathize, and help. We men are socialized to push down our emotions, and that's part of why some men get really angry when women express their emotions, because they're like, well, I don't get to. No, but she's not the one telling you not to feel. Like, so many women want us to express our emotions. And let's see, I think... But yeah, ultimately it turns out Bob wasn't jealous of George, just, curious about George, who he was. And it is, of course, pointing out this thing of free love is all well and good. Some people will still want commitment, proper romantic relationships. Again, it's not wrong to have free love, but it's not working for everyone. Yeah. And of course, the idea of a casual thing does predate the hippie movement, which, to be clear, there were a lot of benefits to, but the hippie movement made it somewhat more mainstream and something that could be talked about, and, that way we can actually solve the problems with it. It used to be like this weird open secret where people wouldn't talk about it, and women were not allowed to say it out loud or talk to other women about it, and they would be shamed as if it's somehow the woman's fault, because misogyny and patriarchy says that everything is women's fault. And let's see, to this day, there are a lot of people who struggle with falling for someone who just does not want a relationship. The fireplace is discussed. I don't like to armchair diagnose. I don't even have a proper, this chair does not have arms, so I can't do it. As someone who has been properly diagnosed with ADHD, I can't help but wonder if Bob has it, because, he goes directly between talking about George to talking about the fireplace. Anyway, they do manage to make a fire. Doesn't end up being quite enough. They have to jump under the covers. That's one of the times where, we see some of their naked bodies, and they get under the covers, talk about how cold it is, nudity is not treated... I did already say some of this, but I'm going to try not to repeat myself. But in this movie, nudity is not treated as ooh, hot, now we have to have sex kind of thing. The way that a lot of, there's a bunch of 80s teen sex comedies, Porky's, and, where, female nudity is basically treated as it exists for the male gaze. The fact that... the fact that England can be a very cold place is brought up multiple times over the course of the film, frequently when people are going to bed and such. And this is, of course, a very clear metaphor for the fact that England can be a cold place, literally. Seriously, though, obviously it is also the fact that England, and I say this without judgment because there's a significant segment of the Danish population, my countrymen were the same way, there is a coldness to a number of the people. They don't quite know how to express themselves, how to embrace others, and that is, of course, one of the major problems that the three characters are dealing with in this, so it's a very nice, because, God, I can just see a producer, going over the movie and be like, do we need, there's a lot of people who are going to criticize if we have all this nudity, and, they're just jumping into bed, talking about how cold it is, what is that about? But no, it matters, let's see... it sounds like the woman who had a nervous breakdown, I'm quoting the movie here, sounds like her husband is cold, and she was a little bit cold to the doctor, saying, how do you know? You're not married. For all she knows, he's depressed about not being married. You don't just say that to someone. If you know them really well, maybe you could, and that they're comfortable with not being married, you could say, well, you're not even married, and maybe say it as a joke. Don't actually, because she's literally saying, if you're not married, you can't possibly know. And let's see, then we have, the coldness, the fact that Bob is seemingly unable to express and embrace, whereas Alex and Dan are and need it from him. And that brings us to one of my favorite shots, when the camera focuses on the phone on the table. Bob, you can tell from his body language, even you can't see his face, he so desperately wants to pick up the phone, and then he does. And even though he needs a doctor, get him a doctor to get him vaccination shot, he doesn't talk to Dan, because that would mean having to actually admit, no Italy. You know, it's not happening, at least not yet. And yet again, he says, oh, don't sulk, even though he sulks when he shouldn't, and others are well within their right to. Can you tell I find his character very frustrating? Did I mention that I really, really find his character frustrating? I hope it's not, like, ruining the video for anyone. I'm sorry. It's just, God, he's so fucking annoying. It's a credit to the movie, because, like, I don't know if we're all meant to be annoyed by it. That might just be me. I'm willing to admit that. But we're definitely, we're meant to appreciate that this is a major trait of his. You know, it happens so many times in the movie. Let's see. Then we have the, yeah, you know, the others are well within the right to sulk because he keeps treating them really badly. But yeah, he just refuses to have the conversation, keeps insisting. He won't be in America for that long. I guess it's not impossible. Part of him believes that. I find it difficult to imagine that it'll end up being the case. He's so flaky throughout the film. There's some chance that Dan and Alex never see him again after the end of the film. Certainly the ending does not seem optimistic for Dan. Alex is taking better, perhaps because she's young. She has an easier time attracting mates. And don't get me wrong, this is not some manosphere crap about how easy women have it. The movie's quite clear that she still has problems. But Dan, being middle-aged and gay, obviously has a harder time finding someone. You know, and this is also, you know, pre-internet. Like, today, he might have an easier time at least meeting someone. I am not the right person to ask if he would have an easy time finding someone that would commit also. I've heard some express frustration with, you know, online dating and this whole thing, but then I've also heard some people, I don't know the numbers, I don't know the statistics, some people have been able to find a long-term partner via the internet. You know, if you're in the situation, please seek out a video that talks about it. I've seen some. I'm afraid I forget who made them. So I cannot give you a name and say they're the ones who made them. And let's see. Yeah, you know, obviously he has a harder time finding someone. I mean, if he didn't, he would already have had a long-term relationship before the movie started. It's pretty clear he wants one. Yeah. Now. Right, before I forget, I do just briefly want to talk about, I did think they did a really good job with the pharmacy scene. It's very clear that some of the people are junkies, as mentioned before, and the, let's see, yeah, as such, yeah, the pharmacist is very careful to not just hand out painkillers to anyone, so he requires some proof and says, papers, please, to Dan. So it seems like Bob is having a negative reaction to the vaccination shot. And this is, of course, something that sometimes does happen. Doesn't mean you shouldn't get vaccinated. Just, you know, look at the numbers. You'll see it's definitely better to get the shot as long as it's reputable, official doctor, all that. And the scene makes it clear, yeah, if Dan hadn't almost discovered on his own, Bob wouldn't have told him about the shot, even though that is obviously why he's sick. You know, like, dude, what the fuck? How do you not? But he's, yeah. I'm not criticizing the movie. It's the character. The movie's great. This is the character. That's how fucking evasive he is. That's how much he doesn't want to have this fucking conversation that he's like, I don't know why I'm sick. Please don't look at where I got, you know, a vaccination. I mean, sure. You know, if you know just a tiny little bit about vaccinations, one of the first things you find out about them is sometimes people have negative reactions to them. And if a doctor is checking you out, yeah, mention that. But he's that fucking evasive, just, yeah. And yeah, he's like, you know, are you still upset about the other night? You know, what Dan is asking is perfectly reasonable. Just call and say you're sick instead of just not showing up. He's so fucking inconsiderate of others. I like, you know, Dan in the synagogue, the little touches, like the waves between him and the others. He notes, you know, Jonathan is like miming rather than actually saying the words. Or maybe he's like preparing for the words, because he does sing once he goes, anyway. And yeah, let's see. Yeah, I have always thought it is ridiculous to ask kids of that age to get into something that serious that isn't about like career in school and such. Like, that's, organized conservative religion for you. Get them young, because once they fully develop their brains, they're going to be a lot less easy to manipulate into being long-term believers. Get them young, you can guilt them. And again, I'm not saying that's about Judaism especially. I'm talking about organized conservative religion in general. It's definitely also true of, for example, Christianity. And I do have more issues with Christianity than, I don't have any problems with Judaism that's like, oh, they're different from Christianity or something else. Like, obviously, the genocide of Palestinians in Gaza needs to stop, but that's not all Jewish people. That's Zionists, and not all Zionists are Jews. There's a lot of Zionists who hate Jewish people. They just think that they're like dominionists and shit. Anyway, yeah, and dominionists think that Jewish people have to be in control of Jerusalem when Armageddon comes, and then they think all the Jewish people will be slaughtered, so they're not looking out for Jewish people. Let's see, and yeah, this bar mitzvah. I quite appreciate the way that the way it's filmed and edited. Once we get the very effective flashback to Dan's own bar mitzvah, and this stuff of like the POV shots are really, really nicely done for these flashbacks and such. And then we have all this stuff of people walking up asking for you and remembers them, and there's so much movement, there's so many people. It really evokes the feeling of actually being at a family gathering like that. I'm not Jewish myself. I've never been to a bar or bat mitzvah, but yeah, it reminds me of various birthdays and such. And it's very effectively intercut with Alex breaking up with Bob, which is also probably the single most mature thing anyone does in the entire movie. And yeah, she points out how this is indeed the culmination of all the different people she's dealt with over the course of the film. It's not just Bob, it's also her mom, how her mom basically stopped getting to be a person when she got married. And how now, Alex is sad with Bob, and as usual, he has to go and say or do something asinine, so he says she asks too much, which is completely ridiculous. Plenty of people are able to form long-term romantic relationships, monogamous and otherwise. It's just that he's not mature enough to participate in one, at least at this point in his life. And yeah, I mean, she's not asking too much. He's just not able to deliver, but he doesn't have that kind of self-awareness. She does, and I want to underline, this is not something that's true of all people with ADHD. I believe I understand myself and a number of other people and issues and such very well. I guess it's possible that the movie might think that ADHD would prevent it. It is, like, the moment that I found out I had ADHD, like, I saw so much media different. I realized, wow, we are just being compared, like, we're constantly being called, like, ignorant and terrible and just, like, it's completely ridiculous. A lot of people are very ignorant about ADHD, and that was obviously worse back then. People knew less about it. Now, that does suck. It's kind of like how sometimes, plus-sized individuals in media will be depicted as being, like, greedy, or, they're constantly eating, they're lazy, that sort of thing. A lot of the time, not at all the case. There's reasons why people struggle to lose weight. There's people who work hard and do everything they can to lose weight and really struggle, and then there's people who don't do anything but just, their metabolism is great, so they look like they put in a lot of effort, where the plus-size individual looks like they're putting in no effort, and it fucking sucks that people are judged. You shouldn't judge people without knowing everything. That's why, I know I can be pretty hard on conservatives. I have spent a lot of time looking at what conservatives say and do. I've spent a lot of time around conservatives, and I do also want to, some of what I say is hyperbole. Obviously, not every single individual conservative is terrible. sometimes like to kind of talk about conservatives the way conservatives talk about minorities. So it's like, see how do you like it when we do this? And it's also sort of like supposed to be a parody of how conservatives see us lefties. Obviously, I don't believe that every single individual one is. I'm just saying they keep voting, they keep for conservatives, they keep making excuses for when conservatives do these terrible things. They can change the movement. They have that power. They have the technology. We on the left can only do so much to, we can try to change their minds, but we can't change the movement from outside. They have to change it from inside. And for decades now, they've only been moving it in, the more extreme direction. Again, I'm speaking primarily of America. Let's see. I think that does bring us... let's see. Yeah. Boy, there are a lot of phone conversations and messages in this movie. Because, of course, someone calls from New York to talk to Bob. Well, if he can be an asshole there, he can be an asshole anywhere. And Dan is called away from the bar mitzvah to go to the hospital, and he does his best. And when talking to the patients, we again get this theme of, patients and loved ones just asking way too much of the doctor. Like, one of them literally directly asks, "Are you saying our daughter will die and that's a good thing?" That's not even remotely what he just said. Like, he literally said the opposite. He said, "I think she'll live. That's good news." Like, she just, yeah. But I do appreciate, they're dealing with a lot. They're the ones whose daughter might die. But yeah, we got to get better at treating doctors better. Like, in general, people who work, also like service workers and just, yeah. Let's see. Then we have my fucking back is killing me, but I'm getting treatment tomorrow. And I'm almost done. Let's see. Yeah. Then the goalposts are moved, and it's like, well, would you be happy if our daughter couldn't move? It's obvious they're grieving. Grief doesn't only happen when someone dies, and they're basically trying to bargain with them. And I do appreciate, I know, it has been proven now. I think there were like 5 stages of grief. It's been proven that's not universal, but certainly they are bargaining here, as if somehow he could change things. Like, he's already done all he could. And he goes home. Bob is there in bed. There's another fucking phone call. And it is very much clear throughout this film, when you're a doctor, you're never really off duty. And he imagines Bob dying in the bed, which would, of course, be deeply upsetting. He would have to change the sheets. Seriously, though, yes, obviously he's scared that something bad will happen to Bob. I think the movie does such a good job of how, yeah, we get this, like, what's the word? When we are worried about someone, we'll think about if it might happen to ourselves or someone we care about, stuff like that. Back pain starting to make it hard to focus, but we're almost done. I am loving the movie and doing this video. It's just the back pain. I swear I'd stop if I didn't want to do the video. It's not just my stubbornness. Donkey-like stubbornness. Anyway, let's see. Yeah, I really appreciate Bob actually does ask, how was the bar mitzvah? And notes how much Dan cares about his family. Like, Bob is immature, but he's capable of emotion and understanding. It was also a really good detail that it would appear his family doesn't know that Dan is gay, or it's possible they're in denial about it, pairing him up with a recently divorced woman at the table, and he says, oh, he just hasn't met the right person. I really hate this thing of, like, guilting him, and like, you're being selfish by not having a long-term relationship, as if it's automatically his fault. Sadly, some people do think like that. And yeah, I do appreciate, like, both of the people who want a long-term commitment from Bob are blamed by family members for the fact that there's not a long-term relationship there. It does happen to men as well, and not only gay men either. It's just what I'm saying is it's worse for women, because so much of the time, Like, it's like, what do you just want her to get with anyone? And yeah, I mean, right now the American government is saying, well, if you're a single mother, you're not going to get this money that you need. So, like, I guess get with someone, anyone. And I mean, do you really think that's going to encourage men to treat their female partners well? Like, there's going to be a bunch of men who realize this is, they can now get away with abusing women, you know. Yeah, fuck Trump's government, seriously. And fuck him very much personally. Yeah, please do release the Epstein files. Yes, I'm sure it'll hurt the Democratic Party more than Trump. Please do. Show us your 12D chess shit. Let's see. I think, yeah. Here at the end, Alex and Dan talk to each other for, at the very least, the first time in a long time, and they both acknowledge how awkward this love triangle is. She chose not to go into the house until after he's left. Both of them barely even heard that Bob had left, and then Alex goes home, sees Bob left his parakeet with her without even asking if she would be okay with taking care of it. After she broke up with him, he continues to be very inconsiderate, and he also doesn't properly say goodbye to Dan, rather just puts the key on some furniture and then leaves while Dan is outside. But yeah, we already know she doesn't necessarily like animals, and he knows that. He's seen it. Oh, fuck, wait, I guess maybe he hasn't. Was he awake when she shushed the dog? And he wasn't there when she yelled at the monkey. Don't touch the monkey. But yeah, here at the very end, we get some of the best camera work in the entire movie. First, like, it's behind him, and it closes up, and it moves around, and he, like, gives up the Italian lesson. I swear I can tell the two languages apart. And the camera goes closer. We get a very effective close-up as he breaks the fourth wall, talks about he misses Bob. Bob did make him happy. He was just there for the cough. Like, on some level he realizes this probably isn't good, but it wasn't nothing, and yeah, just really leaves you hoping. Like, I think that Alex is very much on the right path. I don't know about Dan. I hope so. I hope he gets to have a happier. Yeah. I do really appreciate, at the very least, like, both of them have something that makes them happy still in their lives, It's a bittersweet ending, but it's not all downer, which again is very important for this kind of thing. This relationship that involved a bisexual and a gay man did not end up working out, but life goes on, and sometimes it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. And yeah, I think it comes across. I really fucking love this movie. I think that is absolutely everything, and yeah, just I'm so glad movies like this exist, that just have this really honest, because there's so many straight versions of this movie, just like people trying to make a relationship work and it doesn't completely work out, and some of those are amazing. I'm not saying they're not, but yeah, having some that are not completely straight is really great. I did not mean for that to rhyme, but I did this time.